2, 3, 4, boom. Down here to get away. Hustle, the city just wasn't made. Found a town that ain't worth noting. Skies and roads are wide open. It feels like I'm getting back to my roots. Switched out my sneakers for a pair of boots. Just gotta find community. I know there's
Hi y'all, welcome back to Way Out Here. I decided to mix it up a little bit and show my backyard because it's rainy and super cute today. This week I felt a little bit tired and I was like, damn, this podcast takes a lot of work and time and I have so many other things going on. I do have a full-time job, but honestly, having this conversation this week was just exactly what I needed and reminded me that we need each other, and it's so fun to have these conversations and to connect with each other. And I just left this week's chat feeling so fulfilled and excited for what's to come and more stories. Just really grateful that I get to do this. As cute and small as it is, or whatever it becomes, it might end up being a short-term project or maybe longer term, I don't know, but we all have valuable stories to tell and I'm having the time of my life. Yeah. We're way out here. I love being way out here. So enjoy this episode with Delana. It was such a fascinating episode, so interesting, and I just love how unique everybody's story is. Enjoy!
way out here.
How are you today?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Do you want to tell us how to pronounce your name? I didn't want to get it wrong.
That's very valid. It's pronounced Delana.
Delana. Okay.
Mhm.
When I see a name I can't pronounce, I'm like, I should probably ask just to make sure.
Yeah, I do the same thing. It's always nice to respect the name, you know.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about your upbringing?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very tiny town in middle central kind of northern Michigan. I grew up with pretty liberal parents, which was nice. I remember, like, as a little girl saying to my mom, Mom, is it, boys can only marry girls and girls can only marry boys, right? And she said, actually, honey, that's not true.
No way.
Yes, yeah. Seriously, like, it's one of my most favorite stories to tell because it just makes me love my mom so much.
Yeah. Like, I feel like I'm going to tear up.
Yeah, like, really though, like, I was like a little, like, it's one of those first memories you have, and like, I didn't know any better, and like, she just straight up was like, no, anybody can marry anybody can love anybody, and that's okay.
Oh my God, I'm literally getting teary.
I was very blessed in that regard.
Yeah. And she thought it was okay. It was like something valid to her.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And like later on when I came out the first time, when I was in my first queer relationship, it wasn't even a thing for her. She was like, of course I love you. Of course this is okay. Like,
I love that. It's so beautiful. Oh, every parent should be like that. It's so easy.
it's so easy. Just love your kid, man. Just love your kids. Like, that's all you have to do, We're not hurting anybody.
No. Can I ask how old you were when you kind of identified with your queerness?
That's a great question. So, my first kiss was when I think I was like 7 or 8 years old.
Oh.
And it was with my neighbor, a girl, and I definitely felt like the fluttery, like, butterflies in my belly. And I thought, okay, so maybe I'm one of those girls that loves other girls.
Yeah, that alone, it's just so beautiful because you're like, now you know it's a thing.
Yep.
And so now you can identify with it.
Yes.
Which is like, wow, so simple. Like,
So simple. And like, just again, a huge testament to having someone there to say, yeah, that's okay. That's perfectly acceptable. That's okay for you to, love someone that maybe society hasn't told you is okay. That being said though, like, it took me until I was 32 years old before I realized that I was a lesbian.
oh my God. Okay.
Because of
Compet?
yeah, exactly that.
Oh my
exactly
God.
that.
No. How did they get to you? You were on the right track. Oh.
I know, man. I had like a loving and supportive like family system, but I think, like, as I go back and I think through my experiences growing up in such a small town, it was still so taboo amongst my peers to be a lesbian. Like, it's taken me an entire year to be comfortable with saying I'm a lesbian, because the word gave me such ick from.
I've heard that. I do not feel that way. I love the word, but like I've heard that for some reason there's like an ick with it, like more so than gay or even
Mhm.
queer. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so we were kind of talking about how society left you with the impression that being gay wasn't okay. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't even getting the right messages at home, you weren't getting the right messages from society, which did still impact you.
Absolutely. And it was, you were like a pariah if your peers, like in middle school, thought you were a lesbian, So, like,
Mhm.
afraid of, which, like, obviously, like, heterosexual people probably didn't experience this as much. Like, it was this fear of, like, I can't be too intimate with my friend because if I am, then I'm a lesbian and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
be a lesbian. And I remember, having had my first kiss when I was in elementary school for like we're talking decades, I completely ignored the fact that my first kiss was with a girl. To me, my first kiss wasn't until I was 15 years old and this boy stole it from me at the dance. And it was
So
like a few
wild.
years ago. I know. Like how much you repress. And like I remember seeing uh women holding hands in public. One time I was like shopping with my mom at the mall and it made me feel something, right? And I remember seeing women be intimate together on like television. Like I remember seeing like clips of like the L word and stuff like that and
Mhm.
feeling envious and feeling like those butterflies in my stomach and feeling warm and telling myself, well, I'm just bi, it's okay, only part of me is gay, and it's just, I look back and I cringe because there's literally nothing wrong with being queer in any sense. I had a loving, supportive family that accepted me as I was, but yet I still had this internalized homophobia that I couldn't squash.
That is so so fascinating. And the whole issue even with lesbian like being worse, I'm like wondering if that's just a part of the patriarchy and like another just like another way that it's harder for women and there's more pressure on women
Mhm.
and because we're taking sex away from men, right? Which is a
Yep.
huge thing in the patriarchy. And
Mhm.
I'm just like, wow, this is kind of blowing my mind, like thinking about it. But I was talking to the previous guest about this, about how the messages that you hear in society or church or wherever, like, can often trump what you hear at home, even when you have a supportive family,
Yeah.
which is so sad. But it's like this is why representation is so important and why it's so important to legalize gay marriage and things like that,
Mhm.
because it actually impacts the way all of the next wave of society,
Yeah.
which can totally affect how a kid grows up.
Absolutely. And I think too, like with that representation matters, growing up, we didn't have queer love representation in media. We
No,
didn't have
we had
diverse
some queer
representation.
people,
Right.
but it wasn't about their love, it wasn't about their relationships, they were always the sidekick or
Yeah.
whatever.
And the whole purpose of that character, the whole arc was they're queer. That
Right.
was like that was the character, like, oh, we have the queer character, but like there wasn't depth
To
to
be
them.
fair, I have kind of made that my whole identity.
I mean, I have too. I definitely have too. And maybe
But I
that's
know what
part
you
of it.
mean.
But you know what I mean? It's like I love that now there are more stories where it's like, okay, this like coming of age story of this person who happens to be queer, right? Like the
Yeah,
whole purpose of the story is not that queer identity. It's them coming of age or grappling with whatever, universal theme that we all grapple with, and they also happen to be queer. And I think
right.
that's so important because not only for queer kids, queer youth, but also for folks that are hetero to see that, for kids
Yeah,
that are straight and are, that are cis, to see like, okay, these people are just like me. There's nothing different from them outside of, what their gender identity is, what their
right.
sexual orientation is. Because if we are able to do that as well, it becomes less of a boogeyman. It becomes less of a scary thing. And it's just like, well, you're just a normal person, whatever
Right.
normal means. Like, you're just like
Yeah,
everyone
it's
else.
just a part of who you are. It's not all of who you are. especially when like more and more young people consider that sexuality is a spectrum, I think it's a
Hmm.
lot easier to be like, no, it really is everyone. Like,
It really
this really is
is.
everyone. It's just that some people might be gravitating more toward one side or the other, but it's like we know that there is more to it than just like the binary that we were presented with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So after your first kiss that you didn't really consider a first kiss, did you kind of internally, like you said you thought maybe I'm one of those girls that likes girls. Did that like stick with you during middle school and high school?
So it definitely stuck with me. It was always a constant battle of, knowing, like, I knew that I was attracted to girls and women. But I was so like trying to just stuff that part of me down because I didn't want to be ostracized from my small town community, that like I know I had crushes, but they didn't feel like crushes to me, right? Like Britney
It was more
Spears
like
was.
intense friendship. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Celebrities. Yeah.
Well, it's like,
Yeah.
so like celebrity. Britney Spears was my first crush, and I didn't even realize it until like a few months ago, again, because I'm kind of unpacking all of this stuff. I would just sit and stare at pictures of her in magazines and like stare at her album artwork and think like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful woman. And I
Yeah.
thought it was just because I wanted to
She
be
was a
just like
babe.
her. She was a babe. She still is a babe. And like with friends too, like one of my best friends in middle school, I thought she was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen, and I wanted to be like her. I wanted to be just like her. I wanted to hang out with her. I wanted to spend all my time with her. And I thought it was because like I just thought she was so cool.
But that's what we're taught, right? And what we hear from straight friends, like when you hear straight friends talking about women, it's like about how much they admire them or want to be like them or
Yep.
look like them or wear what they wear.
Yep.
So it's just kind of funny that, yeah. But like it's hard to know that difference unless you're given enough representation and options. Oh, that's my cat.
Oh, what a pretty cat.
Yes. Want to
Oh,
sit down? Yeah,
sweet
here you
baby.
go. Just stay out of the way of the mic, okay? Brittany was the crush.
Brittany was the
And
crush.
did you date men? Did you date boys during high school?
I really didn't have my first boyfriend until I was a senior in high school. I didn't really have my first relationship till I was a senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think probably should have been a sign for me too. um,
I mean, no judgment. My first kiss was when I was 24. And yes, that's incredibly humiliating, but yes, that's where we are.
Not at all, not at all. Was it a good first kiss?
No,
Oh,
no, not
okay.
really.
I feel like the first kisses like are always built up to be this like magical moment, and I feel like 9 times out of 10 they just end up being really awkward and clumsy. I had my first boyfriend my senior year of high school, very short-lived, only a couple months. And then I had my first relationship as an adult with a man, also very short-lived, because we broke up, and then very shortly after I started dating my first girlfriend.
Oh my god. You have to tell me from A to Z what happened there. Like,
Um,
so
so,
you break up with your boyfriend.
mhm, uh, and then I did the typical like U-Haul lesbian move, and within like weeks, like within 2 weeks of me dating this woman, we're already saying I love you. Um,
But wait, how did you meet her? Like, was she a friend? Did you like go on? Were apps a thing yet? Did you jump on an app? Like, how did you meet her?
we met in our community college's show choir called the Collegiates.
Of
Um,
course you did. That's
yeah,
so
right.
gay.
So gay, so gay, so nerdy. She joined the collegiates shortly after I did, and I remember like being really like nervous around her. And I kept thinking,
Mm-hmm.
why am I so nervous around this woman? Like, what's going on here? And then she kind of, I think she must have clocked me, because she immediately started like being flirtatious with me,
Uh-huh.
and it brought up like all those butterflies and like the warm fuzzy
Yeah.
feelings. And like, to be honest, like she wasn't really my type, but it was just the fact that I had this like sapphic flirtationship.
Yeah.
it was like an explosion. You know what I mean? Like my world changed
No putting the toothpaste back in the tube after this.
after this. Right? You just it's so different.
It's so
Especially when
different. You're like, I can't ignore this.
I
And
can't.
being with the man is never going to be enough. Like, eventually, you just admit that to yourself.
Exactly. And I did. And well, I didn't. But I admitted that
It's a
my boyfriend
journey.
at
It's
the
a journey.
time, it is a journey. I knew at the time my boyfriend wasn't enough. I knew I needed to break up with him
Yeah.
because I had these feelings for
Mm-hmm.
my show choir buddy. And I told him I was a lesbian even though I didn't identify as a lesbian at the time, and he responded by throwing his cell phone at me and calling me the B word.
Oh, no. Oh,
Excuse me.
no.
So that was not the most
So you
pleasant
kind of
experience.
dodged a bullet.
I
Okay.
did. I did. To be fair, he has his own litany of trauma and issues he needs to work through. And I think he's doing much better now. But it was not a pleasant exchange. So broke up with him.
Yeah, that's a hard coming out experience. That's really tough. I don't know that you were really a late bloomer at that point, but I do think that a lot of like late bloomer lesbians who have to break up with their boyfriends or their husbands, even like the response that they get back is so like foundational, and partly because of the patriarchy, but partly because of how much that relationship has come to mean to them.
Yeah.
It's like, this was your partner, this was your person, and then to have to like reveal the most intimate thing you could reveal to anyone and then have a bad response, that's like just really heartbreaking. It's hard.
It's really tough. Yeah. And I think that's why I've never really thought about it before, but like thinking back on that experience, I think that's part of the reason why I kept telling myself, no, I'm pan, no, I'm bi. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Because I had such a negative reaction to that. And then it didn't help that the relationship afterwards with my girlfriend that I admittedly jumped far too quickly into.
You
Yeah,
hauled.
100%. I think then having a negative experience in that also further just like reinforced in my brain like, no, I'm not a lesbian. I'm at least bi. I'm at least, you know what I mean? I'm at least pan, as if there's anything wrong with being queer. There's not, you know.
I totally did the same thing. I didn't actually identify as bi at any point, but I would always just say queer because I didn't want to define it. And I really do think it was the difficulty of letting go of the patriarchy and like centering men in my life. That's just like what you do in our society until you have done the work to deconstruct it. You don't even realize that men are central to your life until you have deconstructed it. And that's why like I am fine dating anyone of any identity, like as long as they are female. But like, I don't really care about their journey or how they identify, but it's like I always have to be sure, okay, like you're bisexual. Have you done the work to deconstruct male centering in your life? Have you stopped doing that? And like that's what matters to me more. And a lot of people have it, and some people really have done that journey. So
Absolutely.
you kind of identify as bi or pan.
This was while I was with her, and again it was me thinking like, well, I've had crushes on boys in the past, and I had crushes on the boys slash men that I had dated at that point. It had only been two. um
And
but
you're
what
like,
I
so what does this mean? Yeah.
right right and then so my journey became derailed even further because the woman that I was dating at the time was not faithful, and we were not practicing
Oh,
any sort of ethical non-monogamy
yeah.
at that point in
Right.
time. And so because of that, our relationship got really rocky very quickly, like within like a couple months, but we stayed together for 2 years afterwards.
Oof.
But it was very
It's really
toxic.
hard to break up with your first serious partner. Yeah.
It is. And like I had felt so strongly for her, and it was so much stronger compared to the relationships I'd had with men, that I thought like I have to stay in it. I have to stay in it. And finally 2 years later I figured out, okay, like we can't do this anymore. We're fighting constantly. This isn't healthy. And I think because we were together for years after things got toxic, I forgot what that sapphic experience was like. And so I think it was a lot easier for me to jump back into heteronormativity and stay there.
Can I ask a couple questions about that? Did it ever like kind of cross your mind that like, oh, maybe this isn't the best type of relationship because this is the outcome? Or on the flip side, like, did you stay longer because you were like, no, I have to make this work because it's like it's my first woman loving woman relationship and that's everything. Like how
Um,
what was kind of psychologically going through your mind at that time?
so I definitely, I think at a subconscious level, I think I was like, this is this is it for me. You know, this is my first woman love woman relationship. Like I feel very at home in this like queer identity. So I can't leave. And then on
Right,
the
there's a
flip,
whole identity side.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and like clinging to that identity. And then on the flip side of that too, I did have this like it was that compet sneaking back in, that insidious compet being like, well, this relationship is so toxic, it must be because it's two women. It must be because it's two women, and so it's too emotional, it's too dramatic, it's too whatever.
And can we just say, at least in my experience, dating men is easier. They're a little simpler. It's not. I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but it's like I don't know. It just seems like, and they're just so more active in pursuing women that it's like, yeah, dating women is really tough, and a lot of. I mean, there is the whole internalized homophobia thing. A lot of girls aren't ready to date other girls, even when they know what their identity is. It's just scary because so there's like all of that working against us.
So
Finally.
it finally fell apart because we were both in an undergrad program. There was just some double standards, and I don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of it, you know, but there was just some double standards that were rubbing me the wrong way, and I finally just said, you know, we're done. I can't do this anymore. We're done. Yeah, this isn't good for either of us. And fortunately, um like gosh, 3 months later she met her person who she's now married to, and it's been like over to, and we're not in contact, and they're, as far as I know, they're healthy, they're doing well, and that's all that I can ask for. Yeah, the timing worked out. I was such a mess after that breakup. I couldn't figure out why. Now I know why. I couldn't figure out why that breakup was so much harder for me than my breakups with men. Now I know why. Uh, and he is actually currently still my husband. We're still kind of trying to figure out where we're going from here.
Yeah.
Um, because we do practice ethical non-monogamy. I do have a partner who is non-binary, um, who also identifies as a lesbian. And that relationship was kind of the catalyst for me to figuring out, oh, no, I'm not like on the Kinsey scale, I'm like a 9.8, you know? um and so he was someone that I met when I was in high school. He has quite a few feminine qualities, which made me fall in love with him, and I fell in when I was 15. He didn't want me back. And I just thought like we had a dead bedroom pretty quick into our relationship. And I just thought, well, I must be demi. I must be on the ace spectrum.
Hmm.
And we had this.
I have always, yeah, I've always wondered how many queer people who are either religious or in a hetero like marriage identify as ace or demisexual for this reason, that it's just like, oh, you're just with the wrong person.
Yeah,
Like you're just with the wrong gender.
right.
Like of course I fully honor the ace and demi identity as
Hmm.
well. Obviously that's a real thing
Oh
as
yeah,
well, but I do think there are people that they misattribute things just cuz they're kind of stuck in a situation. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
And that's 100% what I did. But he is my best friend. Like we laugh so much together. We
That can make the best marriage.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. If you're not friends with your spouse, there's your relationship your marriage probably isn't going to be very successful. You have to have that base friendship there, because those feelings of infatuation, they wax and wane. The feeling of being in love with someone comes and goes. And, coming from a divorced home, I very much for a long time was like, I'm never getting married. And then if I do get married, it's going to be with someone that like is my best friend, and that was what he was and still is. There's just not that sexual in love head over heels romantic piece to it.
And it does kind of feel like, just going down that road a little bit, like if we are going to acknowledge that marriage is kind of a social construct anyway, has changed so much over the years. It's like, so it was a contract, and now it like becomes that your spouse has to be someone you're madly in love with and they fulfill every single thing for you, including friendship, finances, sex, like all the things, and it's kind of like, okay, is that realistic? I don't know. Like, it's like maybe that does work. Maybe that is true for 10%. And then maybe another way is true for 10%. And another way is true for 10%. So it's just, yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. But at the same time, it's also like, I think we all have those dreams and hopes of like being in love with someone till the day we die.
Absolutely.
So, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So
I definitely experienced that, like, I don't know, like this urge to be a wife. Again, because of, yeah, and like I thought that like just like that urge to be a wife was because I was so in love with this man. Um, and so I had this urge to be his wife. But I think I just wanted that, like, more than anything, I just wanted that lifetime companion. Um, and like everybody, you just don't want to be alone, right? Your worst fear is like growing up and being all on your own, and really, like, that's not the worst thing that can happen to you. And
definitely not. I've been alone most of my life.
and also too, like,
And it's pretty good
right,
life.
and let's not discount relationships that are outside of the romantic realm, right? Like, let's not discount familial relationships, friendships, queer platonic relationships are a thing, you know? But I put so many eggs in that basket. Again, all those dang rom coms from the late 90s, early 2000s.
I
Like,
know.
this is the ultimate thing. This is what you're striving for. And like, no.
But also, these women were disgusted with these men at the beginning of the movie every
Yep.
time. And then, like, by the end, they're like super sexually attracted to them. That's what the example we were given. So, how were we supposed to know that we weren't supposed to be disgusted with men?
Right. And every relationship I had with a man always started out with that ick feeling, and I always rationalized it away because of those rom-coms.
I'm triggered. I'm remembering the ick with so many people. Okay.
Yeah, it's so funny how we just rationalize that because, again, of that insidious comp het, that patriarchy, that tells us as young girls that our purpose is to please men and to be the good little spouse for a man.
Or even that if a man pursues you, that's a sign from the universe that you're supposed to be with that
Yep.
person. It's like, it's just how it is. Like, if a man pursues you, great. I ended up in relationships a lot just because a guy pursued me.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about whether I liked him or not, or whether we were compatible or
Oh
not.
yeah. I did that
It's
too.
like, oh God.
And
Not surprised.
yeah, and it's so crazy to me again when I think back, like, my mom was so accepting of everything, and I still was able to just rationalize my queerness into this tiny little pebble, whittle it down because of the messages that were coming from outside of my home.
And there is some truth to, like, if you do have any percentage of heterosexuality in you, which most of us do, even if we're really far on the side of the spectrum, like, it's very easy to be like, there's enough here that I could make it work when there could be something better for us out
Right.
there, or more fitting, or whatever.
And like, that's so what I think is beautiful about my relationship with my husband is that when we got into it initially, both of us have always kind of been committophobes, because there's always that like what if, right? And missing out on like potentially this like earth shattering love. We went into it with the agreement that we would practice ethical non-monogamy.
So when you were getting married, you agreed to that going into the
Yeah, we
marriage.
agreed to it before we even started dating, that that was something that we weren't going to have on the table. And I remember several times before I figured out that I'm a lesbian, that I would say to him, hey, I understand that I'm not fulfilling the like sexual needs for you, and you have that option, so please don't feel like you can't go and do this. Like, I want you to be satisfied, I want you to be happy, and if that is you going outside of our relationship and later our marriage, please do so. Not because I was trying to push him away, but because I wanted him to have what he wanted, and I wanted him to be fulfilled.
Yeah, I did the same thing. First, I researched it all because I was deconstructing religion at the same time. So it was very much like, okay, societal norms are out the window for me, you know. And so I was kind of like, what does this life look like? And I told my boyfriend the same thing. I was like, yeah, if you want to sleep with someone else on this trip, you can. And I just like I felt like I was like the best girlfriend in the world and I'm such a cool girl, you
Yeah.
know, but I think I also just like didn't feel jealousy with him.
Yep.
And I don't I don't know if I'm a jealous person anyway, but I've never tried polyamory while dating a woman. So it's like I don't really know if that was what that was or if it's something that's comfortable for me, but it was just kind of funny. Like
Yeah, I experienced the same thing. I didn't have jealousy around the idea of I did a little bit, just in the sense that like I have some mental health struggles that make abandonment a particular source of
mhm.
fear for me. And so I think the jealousy was more so I didn't want him to go out, sleep with someone else, fall in love with this person, and then just decide that he didn't want me at all anymore.
Right. I think that's a very normal feeling. Because with polyamory, like right, the risk is always that it's not going to be just sex. And a lot of the time that's not the configuration you want anyway. You know,
Mm-mm,
you want
no.
people to be able to fall in love and whatever. But like
Yeah.
but that is the real fear is losing a person. This is fun to talk about because like I do consider myself monogamous now, but like I did learn a lot during that experience and I'm like, "Hey, I don't know, maybe someday it'll be the right thing." But it's like you have to kind of face yourself and recognize, look, I could lose this relationship anyway. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean this, I mean, maybe this is opening more opportunities, but this doesn't mean that I'm more likely to lose the relationship. In some configurations of marriage, it's more likely that you'll keep the relationship because you found what works for you both.
Yeah, and it goes back to that idea of, is it really fair to expect one person to fulfill all of your needs? It's a lot. It's a lot of pressure. If it works out, fantastic. But I would argue too that like sometimes I feel like that lends itself easily to codependency.
Yeah,
Um
absolutely.
which is a tricky place to be in, and I think my husband and I had a bit of that we had to unpack when I met my current partner now. We had to unpack a lot of that codependency, and I think we still are, because it's not fair for us to expect each other to be everything for each other. And
Yeah.
because we practice this ENM, this poly specifically, we're able to stay in a partnership
Hmm.
and not have to separate, because like you said, even in monogamy you can separate.
I think that's beautiful. There is like a level of partnership that doesn't have to be romantic or sexual at all.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate in that when I did come out finally, he was the first person I came out to. And he of course was sad, right? Because the relationship that we had changed, but he accepted it with a lot more grace than the first time I tried to come out.
I think that polyamorous people are so much more open minded generally. So it does
Yeah.
feel like there is a softness that you have to bring into polyamory that you will understand each other's problems and try to be a team to solve them
Mhm.
together. Which, I mean, that
Absolutely.
really should be the case in any marriage, but it's like, especially when it comes to this, because it's about your kind of sexual fulfillment and relational fulfillment, there is a level of additional understanding there.
Absolutely. And I mean, you have to do so much work to deconstruct a lot of these societal norms to practice it in the first place that it then becomes really easy to be like, "Oh, well, yeah, like I'm a lesbian, but I am married to a man, but it's okay because we can love and support each other without meeting each other's every single need, and we can go out and have other fulfilling and just equally as valid relationships with people outside of the marriage as well." And you know, we he and I have had discussions too where if, let's say, he meet a woman who he falls for and she falls for him, and they decide they want to have a family, that's not something I don't ever want to go through pregnancy. So that's not something that I would consider foster care if I'm at a more stable place in my life, but I personally don't want to create life. But if he were to meet a woman that wanted to create life with him, beautiful. And I would be okay with him, you know, if we decided to legally get divorced, you know,
Yeah.
that's okay.
During my poly days, like I met a lot of families and different people, and the one of the things I thought was cool was when a group could create kind of a tribe of child rearing. So would you ever want to be involved with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love kids. Um, like, I'm a teacher. I'm working on getting a degree in social work right now so that I can work in schools in that way. Um, I just personally don't think that I was meant to bear life. And I took me until very like within the last few months to accept that. Again, I think that's just like conditioning that was piled on me. I knew it for a while when I was younger. I didn't want to have kids. Then I finally like relented to the
Yeah.
prescribed you get married, you have kids thing. And I'm finally letting that go again. But if he, because I know that he would like to have kids someday, you know, if he meets someone and has kids with her, I absolutely would love to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Um,
You could be the
I would,
auntie, whatever they call it. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. You know, y'all need to go out and have date nights. I'll be there taking care of the kids. Um, Whenever, you know, and I've read stories too about these like blended families and the kids, and have read accounts from kids that grew up in these poly type households, and they were not traumatized by it by any
No.
means. It wasn't this like, you know, horrible hedonistic picture that I've, you know what I mean, the certain folks on the right would have you believe it is. You know, it's just a normal family.
It's more of a tribal kind of setting where everyone's supporting everyone. And I think that's one reason I don't want kids, because we don't have that infrastructure, you know? And so I think sometimes that poly families do have an advantage in that way, where they're like, hey, this is like way more natural. Everybody's more rested. Like, and then with sexual needs or whatever, like, they're more fulfilled. It's not like you're just because you had kids, then you totally lose that because you're so burnt out. Like, in a lot of ways, the poly families are doing it right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, you're doing this poly thing, you're queer, and you're in a small town. Like, in some ways, I feel like polyamory is more secret than even being queer for people, because it's like even more of a social stigma. So, like, where are you at with your openness? Like, do you have a pride flag up? Like, what is it like being in a small town trying to live this and like being on dating apps and all that? Like,
Yeah, it's stressful. Sometimes I forget about it though, so it's getting easier, which is nice. So like I'm out to my family for the most part. My dad doesn't know, but my dad also doesn't know that I'm queer because I haven't had that conversation with him. I don't think it would be an issue, but we just don't have a very open relationship with one another. My mom knows. She's fine with it. She might not understand the poly piece of it as much, but she's not rejecting me for it, and she's accepted my other partner as well. And my friends all know as well. I'm not comfortable, however, being, and I feel so much guilt around this. I'm not as comfortable being out in my small town with my girlfriend.
there should be no guilt. Like, it's about safety first, really. Like,
Yes,
I
yeah,
mean,
you are so right in that. And I would tell that to anybody else in my situation. But
yeah.
like I just, there's inherent hierarchy with my husband and I, right? Because we're
Mhm.
married and we
You're
have these
nested.
legal
Yeah.
protections. We're nested. But the love that I have for my girlfriend is just as strong. It's just as valid. You know, there's more to it there because of obviously my queerness.
Yeah.
So I do feel some guilt when I can very easily go to my local store with my husband and be fine if
Yeah.
people see us together, versus when I go to the local store with my girlfriend, I instinctively want to hold her hand, but then I instinctively pull away because I'm afraid of, well, what if the wrong person sees me holding their hand,
Do you think
and
that that's more about the queerness or the polyness of it all, or both?
that's a great question, because I've been trying to figure that out myself.
That's
Because so
complex.
my
Yeah.
my husband's family doesn't know about me. I'm not ready to have that conversation, and I don't think he is either. And it's his family, so I'm not going to push him into anything
Yeah.
that he's not ready for. And I have, again, that like fear of like rejection, that fear of abandonment that we all struggle with. So I don't know if I'm ready to say,
Yeah.
hey, by the way, I have this other partner. I still love your son, but
I can
I'm a
just yeah,
lesbian.
I can hear exactly how it sounds to a conservative family or whatever. Like,
And his family is very conservative.
are
Very, very
they so
conservative.
you grew up together, so they're in the same town, right? So they actually could see
Yes.
you. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, I
Yes.
would
In
do the
fact,
same thing, honestly. I would probably hide it for a while.
yeah, and it sucks because like I don't, she's not a secret. She's not a secret for me. And I don't want it to be that way. But because I don't want the wrong people to see us, to like prematurely out myself and out my husband, um, who is having his own journey of self discovery with his sexuality right now, which I'm so beyond proud of him for that, because he's
Yeah. It's even harder
deconstructing
for
a lot of
men.
this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And he is figuring out that he is like somewhere in the bi pan
Oh,
area.
I'm so happy
And
for
that's
him.
really, I'm so happy for him, because bi erasure, especially with men, is a real thing. But I think too, going back to, it's it's also the fear of, when I'm out with my girlfriend, the fear of safety as being an openly queer couple. And I am constantly anxious because my girlfriend likes it when I use the term girlfriend for them, but they are non-binary. They use she, they pronouns. I am constantly terrified of her, of what's going to happen to her in public. Especially like, with the scandals of like, people trying to figure out if someone's, trans or not. That whole fad now. What we're seeing is that it's typically cis women of color that are being targeted by this backlash. When you think about the boxer in the Olympics with J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk and all these bigots saying like, oh, a woman or a man beating up a woman, when she's a cis woman from a country who criminally prosecutes people from the queer community, but she's getting targeted, and
It's
I've seen
horrible.
videos of women who are presenting more masculine, having the cops called on them, and getting arrested for using the bathroom.
It's just ridiculous. The projection is based in self-hate and all of that, but and like you said, like with your husband exploring his sexuality is such a beautiful thing that so many men do not get to have and do not allow themselves to have. And it does to me seem like the key to erasing like aggression in men. I don't even mean just queer sexuality, but like honoring your own sexuality and not getting these messages of purity from society and stuff like that. I don't know. There's just, yeah, men have it hard too.
Yeah,
They do. Yeah.
men have it hard too. I mean, yeah, like men are socialized in unhealthy ways, just like women are. Growing up, like they're essentially told you're the yeah, everyone. And I think that a lot of this backlash against queerness comes from a lot of internalized homophobia and a lot of internalized misogyny in general.
These things with masculinity and femininity can represent so such a range of things. Like, I'm trying to remember their actual name, but on Instagram, they're Genderless Gap Ad. I don't know if you know who they are, but I love everything they talk about gender politics and all this stuff. So intelligent, so wise in the things that they said. But like one of them was that the way they identify with their masculinity is playfulness, and the way they identify with their femininity is leadership. And I just thought that was fucking
Oh,
awesome. I was like,
hell
that is
yeah.
so beautiful, and it doesn't have to be those same things for other people, but it's like the way the fact that they could identify like these different sides. I do think that it's not just what society has told us it means, but it's also how we identify with those expressions.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. These very rigid gender roles are more of like a recent Western thing, because when you look into indigenous cultures, the non-binary has been accepted the whole time, you know. Like I just recently learned about in indigenous Hawaiian culture, you know, the person that is on the like the non-binary spectrum that holds both the femininity and the masculinity was highly revered and often most trusted with childcare, you know. And you see that across several different cultures throughout history where it's been not only accepted but celebrated.
Absolutely. And even with the gender roles themselves, it's like it feels like role there were lots of roles, but it doesn't seem like they were based on gender. There it seems like
Right.
they were kind of based on other things. And if you think about someone providing, like at the basis of our elementary school, you know, you have hunters gatherers. It's like those are both
Yeah.
providing for a family, for a
Yes.
tribe. Yeah, I hope for your sake too that you start to feel safer where you're at, and that like maybe you see more representation around you and it leads to you being safe enough to hold hands with your girlfriend. I just hope with more and more people coming out that like you will get to that point where you feel safe, and like where you have neighbors that show their affirming support once they realize you're queer or whatever, you know?
I always have some sort of like pride flag visible, like on my bags and stuff too when I'm out and about. As a teacher, I make sure that I have something like that showing, you know, because if I do have a student from the community that comes in, you know, they do feel like, okay, this person is safe. I'm safe with her. You know, it's getting scarier now, to be a teacher that does have that like outward support, but I'm not going to stop until they like force me to stop, because I know how important that is. I know how much that would have meant to me growing up.
Is there anything you else you want to talk about, kind of being queer in a small town, or even like polyamory advice or anything like that?
Um, so like as far as that goes, I mean, so yes, it's scary being in a small town, but I have not let that stop me from pursuing things that make me happy and pursuing my authenticity. Not to sound like cheesy, but like,
No,
you know,
Miley
if you're
Cyrus just said this at the like Disney injunction, whatever it was, her induction into the Disney Hall of Fame or something. She said basically exactly what you just said. She was basically like legends are the ones who are scared but do it anyway. So you're a
oh
legend.
my god, oh, girl, thank you. You are too. Um, anyone that is brave enough to live authentically as themselves in a world that tries to put us in these unfair boxes, you know. So like if you're a person who's queer in a small town, or you're a person that, you know, is practicing poly or any flavor of ethical non-monogamy, just continue to do it, continue to be you, and don't be afraid to authentically live as yourself. You know, obviously, like you said, safety is huge, but don't let that fear stop you from living as yourself, because holy cow, what a beautiful feeling that is.
Yeah,
You deserve that. Your inner self, your inner child deserves to be loved and accepted as they are.
that's so beautiful. Thank you. Okay, this one is random, but hopefully you like it. What are your boundaries and limitations around substances, alcohol, drugs, etc.?
Okay. Oh, that's a good one. So I am pretty radical as far
Hmm.
as like my views goes around like substance use. Um I think that substance use is okay as long as it's not harmful, right? So first of all, I'm never going to judge anybody that has a substance use disorder, and we shouldn't judge or chastise or shame those people that are in the throes of that. That being said, I was in a relationship with someone who struggled with alcoholism, and it was really hard for me. So if it becomes an issue of like, you're hurting yourself with this substance use habit, you're hurting me or you're hurting others, I have to put a firm boundary of, it has to be handled, or we have to separate just for my own mental health, because it's really hard
that's
to
fair.
see someone you love in the throes of that.
And it's not like it doesn't impact you. Like, it impacts you too.
Right.
So, yeah.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there were times where the partner that I was in a relationship with, he would get really, really drunk and he would forget all of these horrible things he would say to me. And like, we would wake up the next day and I would still be hurting from this and still like processing it. And he would have no idea what was going on.
Which kind of feels like gaslighting, because you're like,
it does.
so you're just not going to apologize because you don't remember. And it's like, even if someone really doesn't remember, it doesn't mean the impact didn't happen to you.
Exactly. So for me, like, I dabble with like cannabis, and other things from time to time. So I have no issues with that. The issue just becomes when it's hurting
Abuse or
themselves or hurting
dependency.
me. Yeah.
I didn't drink or do drugs till I was like 30. And so I kind of have this, like, I always want to be able to try anything I want to. Like, to me, that is a
Yeah.
freedom that I demand. Like,
Yeah.
I I just like think that you should have this balanced view, because also, like, as a religious person, everything was viewed as an addiction if you even did it once. So you're like, oh, you're addicted.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Like, addiction's very serious, and like, if we need to,
Mhm.
define things properly so things can get treated properly. And so
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, yeah, I wouldn't want to date someone with any kind of, dependence or addiction or whatever, just because I just want us all to be able to have balance. But life is
Mhm.
short, and as long
Mhm.
as you're being safe, test your drugs. Like,
Yep. As long as safety is the huge thing for me too.
this has been so much fun. I really appreciate you coming
Yeah.
on. I had so much fun talking to you, and you had so much wisdom, and I love talking about the poly stuff. So yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a blast for me too. I loved the conversation. So thank you so much.
We're queer.
We're way out here.
2, 3,
Yes.
4, boom. Down here to get away. Hustle, so it just wasn't me. Found a town that ain't worth noting. Skies and roads are wide open. Feels like I'm getting back to my roots. Switched out my sneakers for a pair of boots. Just gotta find community. I know there's more out here like me. Cause we're here. Oh, I know we're here. Oh yeah, we're queer and way out here. Sometimes when I'm here really testing my patience, ran out of swipes, had to spam my location. 500 miles ain't really that far. You know, maybe I'll fix my car. Hills and mountains and trees and stars. Beautiful, but it ain't no gay bar. So many queers across this nation. I hear everyone